Welcome back to PricePlow, gentlemen. It's been about 50 episodes since we had the both of you on. I'm talking about Raza Bashir of Iovate and MuscleTech, the Vice President of Scientific Affairs and Product Innovation, and then modern day Renaissance man, Shawn Wells of NMB Nutrition, Ingenious Ingredients, and probably a zillion other things I'm missing. Guys, welcome back. Today, we are mostly going to talk about MuscleTech's Peptide 185, Dileucine right here. And then I want to circle back on Paraxanthine. It's been a year and a half since we came out and you introduced Infinity Paraxanthine to us in the MuscleTech Euphoric Pre-Workout and Burn IQ series. So welcome back on. Everyone could go back to episode 72 for some of the introductions to Raza especially, but let's get a little bit caught up. Raza, you go first. Tell us what's been going on at MuscleTech, and then let's get into, talk to Shawn a little bit, and let's get into Peptide 185.
You got it. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for having me here. Always love being on the show, being able to talk shop, talk innovation. We've been busy. We've been extremely busy, looking at the latest and greatest. And, I'm sure you've been hearing people talking a lot about peptides in general. It's been a tremendous amount of buzz in the industry. And we're super excited to actually be out there now, talk about, what we've been doing on this front, on the dietary supplement front. Right? Something that's actually compliant that you can safely buy and get out there. So that's one of the biggest things that we've been working on, partnering with the best. That's why Shawn's on here as well. We're back at it again, essentially though. We had, we're taking off right where we left off. Great science-backed innovation. That's what at MuscleTech, that's what we stand for. I've got these great resources. I'm in this building, and we want to make sure we have the strongest science, ingredients that are actually going to give people results. That's why we do it, right? We want to make it accessible, make sure people are going to, get the results that they expect, and get the word out there. So the latest and greatest, Peptide 185. So super excited to kind of get into that. If you guys like, I'll just jump right into it. Where do you want to start? To the science? Should we just get right into it?
Yeah, what is so it's Peptide 185, not 185.
Peptide 185, yeah. And there's a lot of great minds that came to, so obviously there was working with the Ingenious Ingredients team. There was, our creative, our brilliant marketers, my team. And this certainly evolved. So Peptide 185, which contains DL185, which is dileucine, right? So it's peptide, two leucine molecules bonded together, which is what makes this, extraordinary and different from anything that's ever been available. So this did not exist. This is something that, we basically launched in conjunction with Shawn's team at Ingenious Ingredients. We've been talking about it for a while. The reason why we firmly believed in it and got excited about it was, we talk about the anabolic stimulus and what drives muscle building, strength, and recovery. We've always talked about, the building blocks of your muscle being amino acids. And then within that, you go back to really, the type of sort of sports nutrition 101, it always came down to leucine, right? Like what's turning on the signaling? How does it work? What happens if you remove leucine and not too much? That's what we kind of understand. But the uniqueness of this is the peptide element. And it's also what we kind of brought into the name of the product. And again, it was us kind of all putting our heads together. We were talking about the speed, Shawn and the team, kept talking about what makes this unique, right? And really it came down to the pharmacokinetics of this peptide, the speed, the 185% greater uptake that you see with peptides because your body has its own, essentially transporter specifically in the gut for peptides. So that's kind of how the name came about. And then from there, the team designed some great science. I think they looked at muscle protein synthesis, saw some really, really, really remarkable results. And that's where it kind of all starts, because we think with the mechanism, right? The mechanism for putting on muscle and strength, it all comes down to, activating mTORC1, and the downstream effect of that, right, is muscle protein synthesis, and then consistently doing that over time, can lead to growth and strength gains. So they saw some really impressive data. In fact, 159% greater muscle protein synthesis. So just really, really remarkable stuff. And then from there, the team scaled and went to a strength training study. And that's what kind of matters, right? Like we want to talk about muscle protein synthesis, but what actually happens when you actually go and put it to the test in a 10-week study. So what they were able to show was really impressive strength gains. Really, really impressive gains. The study's not published just yet. I'll give you a bit of a teaser what we're seeing though, but we were seeing, in both the muscle bench press, the bench press, as well as leg press, 2 to 3x in terms of strength gains, which are really, really impressive. I think in the leg press was up to like 88 pounds heavier, after 10 weeks, and they're also getting more reps. So really exciting stuff though. And that's kind of what we've been kind of working on behind the scenes. But there's a lot more to get into as we dig in, deep dive into the science for sure.
Shawn, do you have anything to add there? I have plenty of questions and everything. And let's get the quick Shawn breakdown.
My name is Shawn Wells. No, just kidding. No, it's been an honor to work with Raza. As you know, like we've been excited to launch our unique ingredients with MuscleTech first and foremost, and that's been an incredible collaboration with their team when we did the Infinity Paraxanthine in the IQ series, and now was with us doing this Dileucine with Peptide 185, sorry, with MuscleTech. It's been tremendous. What we're seeing is, it was about 12 years ago I started working on this idea of peptides going through this PEP1 transporter and preferentially being taken up. It seems so I really want to spend a minute here because it seems counterintuitive, right? And I remember reading this data and just being like, well, this is crazy. Like, what? How does this work? That a single amino acid is slower to plasma than a di or tripeptide. These certain di and tripeptides can go through this PEP1 transporter and get to plasma faster. As Raza pointed out, it's close to 200% faster. It's getting there. Also, what we know with leucine is there's a refractory effect, right? Where it's not a matter of how much you take. If I take 20 grams of leucine, I don't get more muscle protein synthesis. If I take leucine all day long by drinking it out of a jug, like guys used to do, I don't get more muscle protein synthesis. What you need is a spike. And about 10 or 12 years ago, Dr. Gabe Wilson and I presented at the ISSN, their annual event, and we were talking about the idea of leucine resistance or anabolic resistance. And I believe this is tied to androgens getting lower as you get older, insulin sensitivity, and potentially some other factors. Because if we were to get someone on metformin and testosterone and whatever, we'd probably see that leucine resistance or anabolic resistance drop. Certainly if they're doing a resistance training on top of all that. Maybe growth hormone could be another thing we'd throw in there. So all of this is interesting that it's about the speed and how quickly it gets to plasma, as Raza was talking about with pharmacokinetics, is how quickly can it spike, because it's a signaling pathway. It's not a substrate pathway, right? Leucine will contribute to the BCAA like muscle pool, and a fair amount, I think it's around 50% of muscle is BCAAs. And obviously some of that is leucine at that 2 to 1 to 1 ratio. That's where we came up with that. That's the ratio it occurs at in muscle. But that's just substrate. So the signaling that Raza was talking about with the mTORC1 pathway, that's when we're turning on muscle protein synthesis. And then net muscle accretion is a matter of weighing these scales, which we could talk about, the anti-catabolic tool that they already have with Clear Muscle with HMB-free acid, inhibiting muscle protein breakdown. And then on the other side of that scale, we have muscle protein synthesis with leucine traditionally. But my thought was, when I was looking at this, is like, okay, this, and people always ask me, you guys asked me last time with the paraxanthine, like, how'd you come up with this if it seems so obvious? I feel like this is going to be the same thing, Ben and Mike. People are going to say, what, this is so obvious. And still, that's where some of the best inventions come. I mean, when I was looking at that data about this PEP1 transporter, I'm like, okay, thinking of those two things, because I had just presented the ISSN. I'm like, okay, so there's leucine resistance, especially as we age, and it's about the speed and not how much. And okay, there's a PEP1 transporter. Okay. And what if I have a dileucine or a trileucine? Does that somehow work better than leucine? And then we did this preliminary study and we're like, holy crap, it does. And by the way, we did test trileucine and it really didn't have much effect at all. So just so you know, that's why we landed on dileucine in particular.
Thank you. Okay. Well, yeah, that's real interesting because my initial question off the bat was like, why don't we just take tons and tons of leucine? And it almost sounds a little bit similar to the whole HMB story where only like 5% of leucine is getting metabolized into HMB, a best case scenario and everything. Why not just eat a ton of leucine? But you'd have to like get like over 300 grams of protein to make like the numbers make sense. And we had Shawn on the podcast kind of talking about that. And I know MuscleTech's well involved as well. But so is that the answer right there? Is like if I just take tons and tons and tons of leucine, it's still not just
it doesn't. If you take more leucine, you could take 5 grams, 10 grams. You're not going to get the effect, not even close to the effect of dileucine. Here's something else I want to tell you guys that I've told Raza, but we haven't really told the world, and we need kind of more data around this, but it will pique your interest, is that dileucine, you know that it showed up intact in plasma. I saw your write-up that you guys did, right? Something else that's interesting is leucine, when administered, yields some dileucine. So this is very interesting of why that's happening. What if muscle protein synthesis, the signal is not leucine? It's never been looked at before. What if it's dileucine?
Interesting. Yeah. So it was Dr. Ralph Yeager who first teased this on our podcast. That was episode 78. And so he said, like, I like what he said because he's like, the body is basically lazy. You know, it's not going to go out of its way to do all this metabolic work unless it has to. That's why the body likes creatine. It's hard to make creatine endogenously. You give it some creatine through meat or supplementation, it's going to have time to do other stuff. Similarly, the body's lazy. Why? And so why is it going out of its way to form a dipeptide out of a single amino acid, leucine, that, so like that alone kind of tells me, just the bro science in me, like there's got to be an extra reason. Otherwise the body probably wouldn't be doing this, right?
Absolutely. It's about the pharmacokinetics, right? That's the difference maker here versus taking more. And, you know, case in point, I always like to keep a little bit of props, but going back a little way back.
Yes.
Let the record show you're holding up Leucic, right?
I'm holding Leucic. So this is going way back. And again, this is, you know, I'm always proud looking back when we did some of these things. This was 7.2 grams of leucine back then with keto isocapropylic acid. The kit component, you had to take 6 tablets before we knew about this, right? Before this was available, when, you know, you could take significantly less, you know, work smarter, get better results. So although I'm proud we had that, I will say now, you know, based on what we know, having this separate, you know, transporter for peptides, you know, that is the difference maker where, you know, we really believe people are going to get better results.
And when you say results, like, so are we, when MuscleTech talks results, what are you talking about? Is it generally muscle? It's like, we're talking muscle and performance, right? Or are we?
Yeah, that's exactly. We're always on the lookout for, you know, how can we help, you know, consumers, you know, more muscle, more strength, you know, in some cases more libido, but ultimately, how can they get the better performance, you know, reach really their personal bests, right? And I'd say let people reach their, you know, ultimate goals, and everything from their physique, but also from their strength. I think more and more when we talk about muscle, we're talking about, you know, also strength, right? Being dialed into your physical health as well. So yeah, that's a key part of what we're looking to do.
Okay, so given that we're kind of positioning this more like a signaling molecule. So, like a lot of times we drink our amino acids during workout, post workout, and everything, or like if you're doing cardio fasted. it seems like if you're using this for signaling purposes, are you going to have a different strategy for taking it? And if 3 capsules here provides 2 grams. So like, what do you suggest? How do we use it? Long question short.
Yeah, so that's right. So it's 3 capsules, gives you the full 2 grams dose, which lines up with the clinical research that has been done by Shawn and the team. And specifically, the way it's been studied and the way we recommend is, really around your workout and ideally post-workout. So when you exercise, right, for that 24 to 48 hours, usually amplifying muscle protein synthesis, taking this on top of that is going to amplify it further. And then on the days you don't train first thing in the morning, and I also think that's always just a great, sandwiching your day, with protein or amino acids is like the ideal. Bookmark your day. Better chance that you're gonna get either that protein or that you get your protein requirements or the amount of amino acids in your blood.
So and we already know that leucine itself heightens the effect of protein. It magnifies the effect. Like the studies that, speaking of Dr. Wilson, Gabe Wilson and Lane Norton did with the vegan protein, right, where they saw the 25 grams of vegan protein, the wheat protein, I believe, versus the whey protein, there was a 1.7 gram leucine difference. And when they gave that additional leucine, it hit the same level of muscle protein synthesis. So suffice it to say, this is going to amplify your protein, because not all proteins are created equal. So, you may be having 25 grams of a bolus, at a meal, but you may not be optimizing muscle protein synthesis. So, that's when Raza talks about that, like first thing in the morning or post-workout, not only is it signaling there, but you're really amplifying your protein so that you're optimizing that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, there was some recent data that came out showing that there's not really a ceiling on the amount of protein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 150.
Right, as people originally thought. So I think, 30 to 50, no problem. But, for those that don't want to necessarily take that much, I think, taking, Dileucine, the DL185, Peptide 185 at the same time as your protein is an ideal recommendation.
So before Shawn was talking about the refractory nature of leucine or protein in general and how there are doses of it throughout the day. If we're talking about, like, a lot of the listeners to this podcast have a relatively clean diet and they are eating high protein already, like for someone who doesn't have maybe some meals that are lower quality in protein, like, is there an optimization level? Because you obviously don't want to take this too close to like a fully dosed leucine meal. Is it like post-workout, maybe after it's been a few hours since the meal?
I mean, specifically for this ingredient, I don't think we've got that data precisely. I think so. Lining up, at least in what we've seen, post-workout, I'd say immediately post-workout, and probably like 30 to 45 minutes before a meal might be kind of the sweet spot. Just thinking about some of the literature on leucine, but I don't know, Shawn, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so going back to PK, Ben, like I think, like, yes, post-workout, but pre-meal. Right. Mm-hmm. So we want it to not affect the PK, right? Because that's the whole point. So if you were to take it with a meal, I'm sure it would still be effective, and this is all theoretical, but I don't believe it would be quite as effective. Yes, it's a dipeptide. Yes, the transporter may see it, but there's still like gastric emptying and, natural GI transit and all that kind of stuff, the peristalsis. And, it's not going to be quite the same. So I probably would not take it with a meal, but, have a meal shortly thereafter.
So when you're developing, okay, so the question is going to be, what if I'm filthy rich? Does it make sense to do 4 grams or 6 grams or whatever? And so the real question is, like, when you're developing an ingredient, how do you start to land on some of these doses? Like, where did 2 grams come from? And can I do more? That's where we as a team landed. We wanted it to be lower than a leucine dose, where we still need to do more research on that, guys. This is where we saw it be effective, and we extrapolated from some animal data, and we just felt like this was the optimized dose. We could do more data. Obviously, that is the plan.
I wouldn't say taking it gets back to the same idea. Like, I wouldn't say taking 6 grams is ideal. What I would rather do is take the 2 grams multiple times a day. I think that makes a whole lot more sense. So I know Raza himself has been experimenting with, he's put on a lot of muscle, actually. I think he can speak to that. But I know, Raza, you've been experimenting with post-workout and breakfast, kind of taking advantage of both. So
I have.
And using the clear muscle, I believe, and creatine and protein. And
okay, yeah, we should get into that stack. And just so everyone knows, I'm not trying to push like all sorts of sales or anything. It's just the question that comes to mind because I'm in America and more is better, a lot of times. So it's just like kind of the natural question to think about for a crazy month, like pre-show, pre-competition or something like that,
I'm so thankful I'm not the only one that was thinking about taking this multiple times a day, because that was my first thought process. Like, how do I get as many capsules as possible?
I mean, I could see probably taking it up to 4 times a day, but look, like what we saw with once a day is amazing. So
I think we all have a tendency to overdo things as we look at like how they could be optimized. You started talking about the refractory period, and I was just like, I just want to take this like before every meal, like just like kind of like supercharge each MPS response. Why not? But I also did this with GlucoVantage in 2020 and lost like 30 pounds. Like I have a tendency to do these things with these ingredients, but it's exciting. It's really cool to see what you can do with these.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think just kind of building off what Shawn said, and I think Mike, to your point, right? Like I'll admittedly I've got access to any ingredient that I want in terms of how much I can try all these different combinations, and what I found was I was admittedly taking 4 grams, but I was splitting it up, and I already started getting results with it, and I was doubling up certain days, but the most impressive thing that I noticed, and of course it's N of 1, but I do it because I want to assess, right? Also, like, there's the one thing, there's understanding the science, and then there's actually trying it and then comparing it to experience, trying different other compounds and how it feels. But the strength benefits were really, really interesting, because it's one of those things, when you get in the gym and you're doing an exercise, you're doing a lift, and all of a sudden you notice how much easier and like how much better your form is. And it's such a good feeling. And the only thing I could account for was the peptide 185, right? Because I was already doing the clear muscle, I was doing the creatine, right? I've always taken those, and those are just the staples, part of the foundation. At this stage of my goals and what I'm trying to do, right? Hold on to as much muscle and strength. But adding this was really kind of like the difference maker. And that's why I'm really excited just to see what, once it really gets out there, the kind of results that people get.
Now, one question, this may be slightly unsavory, but what if I were just to say like, okay, screw it, I'm just going to go and just take a bunch of testosterone or like, just get roided up or something. Will an ingredient like this have as much of an impact in those situations? Or are we targeting more like natty people like myself who are trying to hang on to what we got?
Well, I think, go ahead, Shawn, if you want to start, and then I can.
I obviously the natty people like this. I don't want to like be hyperbolic, but it is a great like equalizer. I mean, that's where like, again, going back to, and I want to touch on this, is like the idea of what this will do for those of us. I'm about to turn 50. And I, am looking down the barrel of leucine resistance and anabolic resistance and these kinds of things, right? So, I mean, for me, someone that could take this Dileucine, like it is a great equalizer versus someone who is, I mean, whether exogenous testosterone or endogenous, whether someone's young and 20 years old, like in our studies, I mean, they got incredible, think about this. This is 23-year-olds that are getting these results, that are insane results. Think about if I gave this to 50-year-olds that are dealing with sarcopenic obesity, or 60 or 70. Think of the results we'd see. Like, it's dramatic. So, I think, yes, there'd be some results with someone taking high amounts of PEDs, including testosterone and other anabolics, but clearly, I think for those that are natural, this is like one, legal and safe, and that's exciting. And if you take that, like the 3 things he was just mentioning, like something like creatine, clear muscle, and peptide 185, I mean, it's like that's going pretty far down the path of what's legal and safe and will actually get you results.
We had a lot of sorry, go ahead.
Go Ben. Yeah.
I was just saying
the other thing I'll add is like, even if you are, we're talking about, taking, additional, testosterone on top of that, you still need amino acids, right? You still need protein. It's never going to take that away. So I think what it all comes down to is if you want to get the best results, even at 1%, what do you want to take and what do you want to add to that? So I think, there's obviously, no matter where you are, I think there's a market, but to Shawn's point, it is the great equalizer, but you still need something like this. And this is the newest tool that we have for the industry, right? That's safe, compliant, and effective.
Yeah, Roz, you kind of took what I was kind of going to bring up. It was a really great point. Is like we probably have a lot of viewers that are on medical levels of TRT, like not a lot, or we have some people who take like enclomiphene from Maximus Tribe, and they are like not really natty anymore. But I think in my eyes, a lot of people look at these as like mutually exclusive. We had a lot of comments like just take Dest or whatever with Peptide 185, but in my eyes, like the dietary pathway and the androgen pathway are kind of in their own ways. And even if you are on TRT, you still need amino acids. Like you said, this still can be beneficial for someone who might have, super physiological testosterone levels from TRT. You still have to feed it the leucine. So I think it could be helpful. And I don't necessarily think that, someone who's on TRT won't benefit from Peptide 185 anyway. Sure. Yeah, it could be useful for a lot of people as well. And I think that's one thing that like a lot of like quick bros in the gym think of like muscle builders or steroids as like exclusive on their own ways. But in this case, it's really literally a dietary supplement and could help anyone.
Mm-hmm. So on the note of, Raza, you just said it's compliant. On the note of compliance, what is the current status? Because it is like within the DSHEA definitions, I assume it's amino acid kind of combination or whatever, but how do we most effectively get it to market without causing trouble? Because the FDA has kind of like, spoken out against quote unquote peptides. So even though this isn't that kind of peptide, like where are we at with all that?
Yeah. So go ahead. Do you want to start, Shawn? And then I can layer in.
We studied this. We made sure that it was compliant. It's actually considered, we went through a number of these agencies like Dicentra. We used a few of them that you would go through for GRAS, et cetera. So we looked at it, and it's considered an amino acid at this level, like regulatorily. And then we had to show that it occurs naturally in a hydrolyzed protein, and highly hydrolyzed protein, basically anything. We showed it occurs in collagen. We showed that it occurs in whey protein. At varying levels, of course. But we showed that it occurs naturally in nature. So it's 100% compliant, able to be used in food and beverage. It's safe. We've looked at all that. Yeah.
And that's part of the due diligence that we always do. Like when of course we have complete confidence with Shawn and the team over there, but, from our end, we'll ensure that everything's kind of checked. In terms of a regulatory perspective, a safety perspective, and even from a regulatory perspective, very market specific, right? We won't just go and launch it everywhere. We will make sure it's kind of done right. And of course the team's done that. And then to Shawn's point about, where when it's found naturally, like there's the first study has a really good chart where they actually show all the different, so if anyone is interested, you can see like the dairy sources, the meat protein, whey. You'd have to take about 160 grams of whey protein, I think it is, to hit the right amount of dileucine. So you still need, it's a good reason to supplement with it. But, it is interesting that it is, naturally found.
Okay,
unless you're doing that barbecue every day, Mike, right?
Well, I'm not. You're in Texas. Here in Oklahoma, I will say, I love it here in Oklahoma. Barbecue is nothing compared to Texas. So you're down there in Georgetown. You're a lot closer to the good stuff, Shawn. I'm telling you, man. It's one thing I miss. So, so we kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like it sounds like you guys have put together some pretty decent stacks. Obviously, like creatine's a foundation in terms of like if you're on a limited budget, I think that's a place to start for sure. Find some deals on protein chicken, use PricePlow, all that. MuscleTech, you actually have some pretty good protein deals rocking on your side a lot too. But so like, yeah, what is the stack, Raza?
Stack, I think the ideal stack, turning on the anabolic signaling, peptide 185, get the dileucine, and then for kind of essentially just knowing that your protein's always, muscle's always turning over. So that's to turn on the signal for protein optimization. But to prevent that protein breakdown, the clear muscle HMB free acid. So I'm super proud of this. It's been on the market, for more than 10 years. And it's specifically the HMB free acid version, which I think, is got the best science, the best results. And again, it comes back to the speed, it being a metabolite of leucine. So it mirrors really well with here, right? Giving the peptide of leucine and then giving the metabolite that's so effective at turning off that signaling. And I think just, combining those throughout the day will allow people, again, whether it's that 1%, that little bit of edge, but like for most of the people, and we've been selling it for years, people are getting phenomenal results for it. So I highly recommend that stack. And then, of course, the creatine for the ATB, performance and muscle. So I think that is the ideal. And then the really interesting part of this, we've kind of gone a step further. So like we're always thinking about the pipeline. Sean knows he's going to get a call from me being like, hey, what do we do next? How do we extend this exclusivity? And, where do we go from here? But we have studied it with essential amino acids. We did fund a research, and again, that's just part of what we do. We go and invest. We want to see, how we can evolve the science and kind of keep giving back, right, to the industry and what's next. And we combined it with an essential amino acid, and I'm telling you, I have never seen any results in terms of protein synthesis like this. And what we were talking about, there is an abstract publication that you can find out there. It's just an abstract for now. It will be, the manuscript is going through the full manuscript process, so it's going to go through the full peer review process. But literally, muscle protein synthesis more than 7x. It was like unbelievable. And comparing it to BCAAs. Leucine, when we substituted, that added 2 grams of dileucine in combination with all the other essentials. So I think, where this could go, how this could allow people to just basically respond to the training protocol that they already have, to get past any plateaus. I think that is really interesting science. So super proud of that. And, you can see us kind of innovating in that front in the near future.
Okay, and one question on timing. When you mentioned clear muscle, the free acid HMB, are you just taking them at the same time as dileucine?
Great question. No, I am not. So it kind of goes back to Ben, what you're talking about the refractory period. Usually what I'm doing is I'm taking that a few times throughout the day later on. So I'm usually taking this either first thing in the morning or post-workout. And then typically in between my meals, I'm taking the clear muscle HMB free acid.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
So by the way, Mike, I want to throw in, we were talking about this before the show, but we have a preclinical that Raza would love the data on, where we looked at dileucine with 50 other ingredients that are found in sports nutrition as ergogenic aids. So think arginine, citrulline, ketones, tyrosine, taurine, go down the line, everything that we have at NNB, and the number one synergist to have these rodents have the greatest level of endurance and performance was paraxanthine with dileucine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's super interesting. And by the way, we are considering the idea of protein synthesis and the mTOR pathway with the brain. There could be some really interesting things going on there as well. Like we always hear about BDNF and NGF, but I feel like mTOR is kind of just thought about with muscle. But there may be some cognitive effects that are really interesting with dileucine, and we need to explore that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, people with higher protein diets, it's not just like muscle performance that's better. It just seems like whole life, quality of life, cognitive. I'm with you there. Okay, so you're talking about performance. So like paraxanthines, that's not going to like increase muscle protein synthesis as much. But were you talking more like in a rodent study, they're going to be on the hamster wheel longer or something like that, or is it?
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a number of ways that they could actually work very well together. So, I mean, you're showing increased nitric oxide to the brain with paraxanthine, but also to the muscles. And there's that kind of mind-muscle connection. I think we're going to have greater fiber recruitment with that central nervous system stimulant effect, but we're also getting more acetylcholine, and there's like oxidative stress reduction. We see glutathione and catalase affected with paraxanthine. So there's a lot of ways that they could be synergizing. We don't know all the ways that that's happening, but definitely really interesting. So this makes the euphoric stack is one more thing that you could throw in. But it's fascinating, and truly it's like it was completely unplanned and like just serendipitous.
That's hilarious. So everyone can go back to episode 72 to kind of talk about the beginnings of paraxanthine. But Raza, can you kind of catch us up? Like how has MuscleTech Nation kind of responded to euphoric from your perspective? Do you see a lot of people like just hanging on with it, or do you see people like starting to ask for higher caffeine afterwards, or like what's been kind of the general experience? And then just go on with whatever else you've kind of learned from that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think overall the results it's been really well received. That I'll say. I'm really proud that we were able to kind of get it to market first, get it in people's hands, because I was super passionate about it, big firm believer in what it could offer, just knowing how it could benefit. But, I did realize there was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle because everybody likes their stims, right? And, we did need to get over that. And I think where we've gotten is sort of a place where, the people that have taken it, and I mean love it, like the people that are really like, it's like they love it. And then there's a second group that are looking for alternatives, something that they can train at night. I get a lot of really good feedback. It's like, I want something to take later on that's not crazy stem, but I still want to get that benefit. And because of that, the way the paraxanthine, the half-life is, that shorter half-life, it's sort of like that 4 hours, but it's just like super clean and hits you quick. People like it for that. And then they notice the performance benefits. So I think there is interesting stuff that we're seeing. It's like the people who have embraced it, love it, and they don't want to come off it. And then those that were kind of hesitant, it's starting to find its place.
Yeah, we did a study in Brazil, and unfortunately it was about 2/3 of the way through, and it ended up shutting down just because of some political reasons that are really frustrating. And by the way, that happened on a number of studies through COVID as well. I can't even tell you how much money has been put into things, and studies have not finished, and it's super frustrating. But the data that we've seen, I can tell you at least anecdotally from probably over 100 people. I mean, people hit me up daily about paraxanthine on my Instagram. I get screenshots all the time of Oura rings, and HRVs are not just, HRVs are worsened with caffeine, just like alcohol, especially late in the day. With paraxanthine, we're seeing it improve above baseline. We have an e-gaming study coming out that, this year is going to be incredible, where it actually shows, we pulled some early results, but it shows with continued use that there's better and better and better effects. Obviously with caffeine, we see that adaptation effect where it's worse and worse and worse over time. So this is super interesting. And this is where I think a lot of people think of it as a cleaner caffeine. Like, yes, it doesn't have the side effects, especially if you're a slow metabolizer, but we're seeing all these benefits that we just simply don't see with caffeine. Namely, like nitric oxide, like via PDE9 inhibition, we see a 50% increase in nitric oxide. We don't see that with caffeine. This BDNF effect, the glutathione and catalase effect, some of the stuff we're seeing is really incredible. Almost every way I can think of the way the brain ages, including like beta amyloid plaque. We saw this preclinical. We saw a reduction in that. In the preclinical, this is the most insane results. And again, kind of like with paraxanthine, if we were to look at like older populations, oh my God, I think we'd see like incredible, insane results. When we looked at older rats in this one study where we had like a black pool of water, right? And there's a ledge in that pool and it's escape latency. They have to like find where that ledge is. So this is just mind-boggling that without paraxanthine, it took about 60 seconds for them to find that ledge. With paraxanthine at the full dose, it took 23 seconds for them to find that ledge.
Cool.
That number should just blow your mind. That is an insane number. So these two ingredients are so great if you're a young strapping guy, in all these studies, that's 23 years old or a college trained male. But if you're my age, these ingredients are going to work way better. Now, I don't have the data yet, but I can simply tell you that the feedback I'm getting on both of them, the science is there. I'm very excited to look at both of these ingredients in an elderly or aged population, aged being even a good looking guy like myself.
Well, we do appreciate, it's kind of funny because I'm over the hill as well. And so we appreciate in the industry that you're actually getting data on young 23-year-old men, because we know the data is going to look worse if you do that. So back in the day, we used to tease about ingredients that were studied on 60-year-old and plus people. And the data is most likely going to look good on a various number of ingredients. We'd want younger data. So you have to almost take this leap of faith, this business leap too. If you're going to put money into a study on 23-year-olds, it better be pretty good. And then we could just extrapolate out for us older guys that it's going to be likely even better than what they saw. So I do appreciate you doing that, because after all, you could have made the numbers look bigger and the charts look, way crazier.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, so you're talking about these incredible benefits for paraxanthine, and I absolutely believe you. I'm a lover of the ingredient, but I'm also a lover of caffeine. And so I guess my question for you, this is all theoretical, but do you believe that the other two metabolites of caffeine are just that negative, that the paraxanthine benefits are probably there as well, but we have such a negative force against them with theophylline and theobromine that we're not seeing the benefits that you're possibly getting from paraxanthine?
Yes, and I think it's not just that. We've seen some issues with 3-MX, which is downstream, that's present in both of those. We've also seen, yes, definitely theophylline, tons of side effects, but not to be missed in that discussion is caffeine itself. Which, yes, maybe for you, maybe you process it well, you're a fast metabolizer. Look, there's I feel like if we've shown that about 60% of the population is a slow metabolizer, and my guess is there's fast metabolizers that can have caffeine and go straight to bed. So maybe this Goldilocks zone of people that take caffeine, have limited side effects, and get great benefits is probably a 20% window. Maybe you're that, Ben, and that's amazing. And maybe you metabolize these other metabolites that could be, problematic better than others. It's not just CYP1A2. There's a number of cytochrome P450 enzymes in this kind of pathway as you keep going downstream, getting all the way to xanthine or methyl uracils and uracil. So it's actually pretty complicated. I don't have all the answers to that because no one ever looked at it. So that's where we're kind of breaking new ground. But absolutely, I think you're blessed with your metabolism. I definitely am not in that group.
I didn't want to focus too much on the good metabolizers there in terms of I must have it nice. I do enjoy caffeine and everything, but I also, it's not lost on me that all of the benefits of caffeine are not just the stimulation that you get. I understand there are other benefits. And so I guess it always kind of leads me to question, when paraxanthine gives me all these benefits, I'm sure I'm getting those benefits as well, even though I metabolize caffeine just fine. There's still a lot of reasons I would use paraxanthine, namely these benefits we're talking about here. And it just makes me wonder, are caffeine users missing out on these because of the other things involved? Or, is it likely that Ben is getting some of those benefits because I metabolize the theophylline and theobromine? I think what I'm understanding, though, is that we definitely need more data comparing the two to really understand why the benefits are occurring.
Yeah. Exactly.
One thing I just want to add, just even hearing you out, Ben, and just talking about the benefits of caffeine, typically being at those higher doses. If you look at them, they're pretty high to get the performance benefits. And what we see is a trend towards, some people love having that dose, but there is definitely a market trend that we're seeing of people wanting lower doses of caffeine. And if you think about that for a second, with paraxanthine in particular, like the dose that we're recommending in like Euphoric in our SKUs, where you're getting up to the 300 milligrams, you have to take north of 400 milligrams of caffeine for your body to metabolize that and convert that into that dose of paraxanthine that provides that efficacy. So I think, one of the things that we're seeing by going direct to the source and taking a substantial dose, an efficacious dose, that you are getting these better results. And I think that's also some of the reasons why the people that do try it and try it at the right dose are loving it. I think that's another interesting point, because as you start to go lower doses on caffeine to eliminate theophylline, which I do agree, it's like there are negative effects. It's out there in the literature that theophylline in particular is really, really negative, and it sits in the bloodstream for a long time, which is, causes all the downsides. So if you can bypass that and get more of the efficacy, it's just people have become associated with some of those effects and how they feel, that dirtiness to some degree that, they don't consider that dirty, but it's how they assess efficacy.
Theophylline has an insane half-life. It's like in the 7 hours on average. But I mean, going back to the bioindividuality of caffeine, knowing there's a 1.5 to 10.5 hour range, that's just a massive range in how we experience this molecule very, very differently person to person. And really, as we were talking about Dileucine, which we can go back to, that is pharmacokinetics, right? That's what's causing that. Same here, like yes, there's a 70 to 80% conversion from caffeine to paraxanthine. But for me, with a 10.5 hour half-life, if that's what I am, wow, that could take days for me to get to like the full amount of paraxanthine. So, and also, as I was pointing out, we're clearing out this pathway of these things that may not be advantageous for us, the 3MX, the theophylline, theobromine, the caffeine, and some other downstream metabolites to just be at paraxanthine, where we get this clean experience and get it all at once.
It's kind of funny. Like, we've been covering high stim pre-workouts for so long that I think we've almost created an audience of people that are going to like it. Because if you are like a very slow metabolizer and caffeine wrecks you, there's a decent chance you're not going to want to watch PricePlow content that much, because it's like at least 25% pre-workout based. I almost feel like we've kind of created this demographic that isn't 100% the entire like user base that is potential out there. So. Because you mentioned like 60% being possibly on the slower end of things. I'm like, well, not our audience, because our audience loves pre-workout, but we've kind of created that audience. So Shawn, is it that many people that are slow metabolizers? Or do you have the number breakdown?
59%. Yep.
Oh man.
And 93% of the population in the US consumes caffeine every day, but 9 out of 10 in a study wanted to consume less. So think about that dissonance of that decision. Right? There's real dissonance, and I could get into psychology because I'm very spiritual and conscious since I've done my plant medicine work. But to be not aligned with like who you want to be and making a daily decision, 93% are consuming caffeine every day. 93% may not consume food every day. 93% may not go to the bathroom or take a shower every day. 93%. And for 9 out of 10 of them to want to consume less, that tells me that there's like a real addiction and a dissonance there, right? And how does that play out in your life?
I really, I enjoy what you're saying there. And I always try to point that out. It's a really easy way to get people to be interested, because it's absolutely true. I know 93% of my friends consume caffeine every single day, but an extremely high percent of them will fall yeah, I drink caffeine, but I wish I drank less. Like even like people who love the feeling, love the, whatever is the taste, the benefits, whatever it is, most of them will bring up, but I wish that I consumed less. Well, for whatever reason. I think there's a lot of reasons too. It isn't just how it makes it feel, but there's also just an inherent understanding like I'm not doing the best thing for my body as well, which is just what we've taught people as well. But I think that over like the macro of the industry, we have seen a lowering of doses though in the last couple of years. We used to talk about 600 milligram doses, and we really haven't talked about that in a while. At this point, if we talk about 400 milligrams, I'll usually note that's a little bit higher than I mean, and even like behind the scenes when Mike and I are working with companies, most often we're talking about 300 milligrams ish now, whereas previously it was much higher.
Right. Yeah. I think, a lot of companies that are doing that stuff are probably not coming to us, but it is funny. Like, you can't deny the data, like 5 milligrams per kilogram to 9 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine is where the sweet spot is on like strength and performance. So I don't know. Like, I don't think I don't think you want to be living in that range.
Data, if you delineate that data out with fast and slow metabolizers, we actually see a negative effect on cognitive and physical performance with the slow metabolizers, and we see a benefit with the fast metabolizers. That's why some studies actually show some like equivocal results. If you were to actually tease that out, so like I would have worse results, Ben would have better results.
Right.
That's basically how it comes out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why we have Euphoric with Infinity inside. So,
I literally spent like when I think about Infinity Paraxanthine, like I spent probably like 15 years of my career, trying to find ways to how I could smooth the caffeine experience out. Super high doses. This is before Paraxanthine. Like literally, like all the time, I was in the lab here with the team, and we were assessing it. Whether it was theanine back in like 2010 and all the other various ingredients. How do you get the most of it? But now, to what Shawn just mentioned, now that we're seeing, and it was presented at ISSN as well, that they are now teasing out the differences between when you start to look at the dose needed among responders and non-responders. And I think once we start to understand more of that, like people are just going to it's going to lead to better efficacy. Ultimately, when you find the sweet spot and you can get rid of those, basically eliminate those genetic differences.
So Shawn, what if we find out that like you can get really good performance with 600 milligrams of Infinity Paraxanthine? Are you still not going to, you are pretty set on 300 milligrams per serving, 400 milligrams max per day, right?
You're putting me on the spot, and Raza's like, okay, what? So this is where we're at just currently. I think, look, guys, this is an ingredient to back up to the numbers I just said. There's 2 ingredients in human history that have moved us, that are in our zeitgeist, that are woven into humanity, and it's alcohol, ethanol, and caffeine. There's no 2 more important ingredients than that. So we know how important it is. We also know what's happened to DMAA, to ephedrine, to all these other ingredients. And we're trying to do this the right way and think about this because caffeine is a $1 trillion market. And so we want this ingredient to be around. We want it to be, we know it's safe, but we also want it to be perceived as safe. We don't want it ending up in 600 milligram things. And people, look, when you stack it with other methylxanthines, you can have serious side effects, right? So we just don't want those situations. And we want people to understand what it is and how to use it for it to become zeitgeist, over a period of time, before we just kind of throw it out there and then someone's drinking like a fifth of alcohol with it. Someone's, drinking a quad espresso, a bang, and this with it. And we get thrown under the bus and that ingredient's gone, period. So we're trying to take could we get more sales? Could we get even higher effects? Yeah. And I know people have told me what they've been taking, but I'm going to stick with this for now. And by the way, on our grass, we were given 400 milligrams because they said, well, this is where caffeine is, so this is where you'll be for now. Even though we're much safer, like radically safer, they just kind of said, okay, this is your dose a day.
That makes sense. You don't want to ruin it for everyone just because a few guys want to bench press more or something with a heroic dose. It's not at all, of course, not worth it. Well, thank you for the good answer. Yeah.
Go crazy.
So did we miss anything on Dileucine? So we kind of veered off into Infinity Land and everything. Did we miss anything on Dileucine?
There are some staggering numbers from the training study that are just mind-boggling. Raza, if you want to talk, but like the leg press numbers, oh my God.
It did seem that some of the bullet points in there, some of these people, I don't know if you could tease them out. Some people responded like insanely well is what it looked like.
True. Yeah, there's absolutely hyper responders, and why that is, again, is super interesting. There's a lot to look at there. It's always fascinating to try and understand why there's hyper responders. fascinating because there's a huge, no matter how much we do placebo effect, there are people that just are more driven, like more belief based. Like I'm going to like maximize like my results out of this study. And man, the power of just belief and drive is cannot be underestimated. I mean, if you follow like Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, some of these guys, like that kind of data is staggering. So I do believe in that kind of stuff too, but there can be physiologic reasons as well, different just genetics. But it's fascinating. But we did see 16 more, like 16 reps, like on the leg press versus 5 with the 5 with the leucine. Sorry, so dileucine 16 reps. Leucine was 5 reps, so like a staggering difference. Like it just, some of the numbers are mind-boggling. And again, these are like 20-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So we're not looking at like people like my age or even your age, Mike. So this is, and then we're not stacking it with HMB. We're not saying like they weren't certainly using any PEDs. They were like, their diet was controlled. They were on the same amount of protein. They weren't allowed to have alcohol, caffeine, any other type of things. Like, so it's just, it was controlled across the board. And these were the results, like after 10 weeks.
So Shawn, way earlier on, you had mentioned, I'll be honest, I never really heard this phrase, leucine resistance. Of course, I've heard insulin resistance and everything. Like, is that a real medical thing and everything that I haven't seen? Can you? Yeah,
sometimes it's also called anabolic resistance, but it's been attached to leucine resistance where like you can have the bolus of leucine or the bolus of protein that contains enough leucine, but you're not optimizing muscle protein synthesis. And so one of my theories around this, because I had worked for 10 years as a chief clinical dietitian as well, is like the more kind of in a net negative nitrogen state you are, like think of, again, being older, having lower androgens, insulin resistance, or like when I was dealing with people that had infections or burns or wounds. Now, like the leucine needs aren't like 2 to 3.5 grams. It's 5 grams, 7 grams, 8 grams, 9 grams, right? And what's the likelihood that they're going to get that quickly enough as a bolus to heal those wounds or to heal that, this trauma? And so, that's like a leucine resistance that we see because the nitrogen needs are so high. So it's really, really interesting that unfortunately, as we age and we tend to eat less protein, we tend to have less of a bolus of protein. So even the amount and the timing of it, that we actually need more than when we were young. So this is like, this is a real problem. This is why we get the sarcopenic obesity, where we're trading off muscle tissues as we age. Someone may be 180 pounds when they're 40 and then 180 pounds when they're 70, but that body composition difference is very different because the sarcopenia part is the muscle loss and they're trading it off for fat gain. And because they're never optimizing muscle protein synthesis. So this is where like, TRT and, insulin sensitivity agents like a metformin, berberine, dihydroberberine, all these things like that, could potentially bridge that gap, maybe growth hormone and some of these things that are going down, declining as well. It could be interesting, but yeah. Mm-hmm. And obviously HMB, of course, in this case, HMB, creatine, and dileucine could be a massive game changer in this protocol, maybe even dihydroberberine.
Raza, can you just put it all in one tub for us so we just have to take one scoop?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'll send it over.
No, I'm serious. I'm giving you a product idea.
We're lazy. We're cooking up. That is a good idea. No, we've been cooking up a lot of great ideas. But like as I was like just listening to Shawn and just thinking about like that's the really cool part about our industry. The stuff that we're doing. The trends start in sports nutrition, but they have a huge impact. Well, not just among 20, 30-year-olds. Like literally, like I think of my family, I think of my friends, and I'm always telling them, you need to protect that muscle as much as you can. And especially where the industry is going right now. And you see, a lot of people talking about, the obesity and weight loss drugs. out there, right? And that trend, and that just compounds the effect of people losing muscle in many ways. Yeah, you're losing weight, but after that's muscle, what else are you taking? And that's where literally like the solutions that we're talking about, the Dileucine and the HMB for acid and the creatine, I think they're like things that are almost foundational stuff. And I get, it's expensive to take all three, but if you do have the luxury, or if you are thinking about it, I absolutely would be considering them for those reasons, because I mean that, not just when you're young, build the strength when you're young, but as you get older, that vitality and that quality of life is dependent on it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I meant to actually bring that up on this show, is the GLP-1 agonist being so heavily used, and the discussion around muscle. Like, clearly, this would be a good stack to add. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to add that when you started talking about the muscle loss during weight loss and everything. That of course brings up GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, and all those. We probably got to be safe there, but I'm not selling the supplement myself. I would say that it would make sense to put this in an Ozempic type stack, just to try to do whatever you can to protect muscle if you are going to use those drugs, which I haven't ever touched. So, but yeah, it would make sense to at least try.
Well, along those lines, berbeриne's been shown to be a GLP-1 agonist and help in similar ways. So if you're taking those, which I recommend as a great anti-aging aid and improving body composition, but clearly that would be a good stack to have all of these with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm fresh out of questions here. We've gone over an hour. I'm pretty excited about everything, and excited to see MuscleTech bring yet another novel ingredient to the market. Like this is becoming a thing, and I think we expect it from you at this point, Raza. So this can't be the last.
It's our job's never done. Just you get ready. More to come from the team over here.
Excellent. Yeah. Any other closing remarks or comments?
No, we're excited to continue working with MuscleTech and be essentially like a kind of intertwined arm of each other. Like I'm very happy to have worked with Raza on Paraxanthine Infinity as well as the Dileucine. It's been great, and we have more things in the pipeline for the industry and certainly for MuscleTech as well. They've been an incredible partner, as have you guys. So thank you for the work you've done with NNB, with TSI, with MuscleTech, with all the things I've been associated with. I'm just very glad that I can work with you guys. You guys put out such great information. I think you're such great advocates for the industry, Ben. I've loved what you've been talking about, like really trumping the Now Foods studies and all the dirty players in the industry, because as a formulator, that stuff frustrates the hell out of me. So I'm just so thankful that you guys are out there and doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And we're thankful that you guys are putting out stuff that makes this interesting 15 years in, that we can keep talking about new stuff. Couldn't be doing this kind of content like 15 years ago. So that's because of guys like you. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Huge thank you. Yeah. Thanks very much.